There's 9 participants. Welcome, welcome everybody. This is Crispina French. I am a creative textile recycling artist and activist, and I am so excited to welcome you in just a couple of minutes to my live hands-on embroidery and stitch along webinar. So hang tight, we'll get started just probably 3 or 4 minutes from right now. If you want to grab some materials to have ready for some stitches that I'm going to teach you, you should have some scissors, a nice sharp pair of scissors, some pins and sewing needle and embroidery floss and some scraps of fabric, and that will be a great way to get started. All right, welcome everybody. I'm just gonna turn off my screen sharing, there we go. All right, welcome everybody. I am so excited to welcome you here and talk to you about creative textile recycling that will really help you through the next couple of weeks, because I don't know about you, no matter what your train of thought or your belief system is, there seems to be so many questions right now out in the world. We have so many different really important issues that are coming about, and I feel like when you start paying attention to all those things, it kind of wears you down and it kind of brings a little more anxiety my way, certainly speaking from personal experience, than I'm used to. So I find that this practice of creative textile recycling is a really wonderful way to connect with other people, have fun, and nurture yourself as well as the environment. And today I'm going to talk to you all about a project that's called the Stitch Along. It's a Stitch Along with Crispina. That's me. And it came about back in March. It kind of grew out of something called the Scrapbox Challenge. And I'll talk to you more about that another time. But it just, to suffice to say, it really filled a need in my culture and my people who follow me to have connection and to really do something together that build community and allow for us to kind of hang out together online. And right at the right time when the pandemic was just kind of getting underway and we were all so fearful and unsure of how to best navigate our days. So the Stitch Along came about once the Scrapbox Challenge kind of, the Stitch Along was a new way for people to continue that connection. And the way that it works is that anybody can participate, and you buy a kit from my shop, and there'll be a link in a little bit later of how to go about doing that. And everybody makes a square for a blanket. And there's live hands-on tutorials with me right here on Zoom. And there's a private community online for people to connect that way. And when you're finished with your square, you send it back to me, and I make it into an amazing, beautiful blanket that has so much love stitched in from all these people across the world. The first Stitch Along ever started in May, and it wound down just in late summer, late in August. And we were able to raise over $1,000 by the sale of the blanket that I made from all your handwork for our local women's shelter for survivors of domestic violence. It's called the Elizabeth Freeman Center, and it's located in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And that program and that project was such a huge success, and everybody involved had so much fun, myself included. I decided that it should just be an ongoing project that I run a couple times a year so that we can continue that giving, that meaningful work. We can kind of bring creativity to a larger group and connect that way. So this is going to be my second Stitch Along, and I'm here to show you a little bit more about that. I would love for you to participate with me in the Stitch Along and, just have that kind of meaning in your life. Like it has so much value to your own well-being when you can make for others. And when you can make for others using recycled fabrics with a group of awesome people, it really does lift one's spirits. So I want to show you, today we're going to go through a few stitches. I'm going to show you, it's going to be hands-on learning. But before we get started, I want to show you, I'm going to try this thing. I've not done this before, but I'm going to try to share my screen, and I'm going to try to show you a slideshow of the blanket that we made. Let me see if I can find it here, that we made from the first stitch along. And you'll see the, here we go, I found it. So this is a close-up shot of the blanket, and you can see all the squares. Each square with hearts on it was made by a different participant. And just it's honestly, it was much more meaningful and moving for me to have the honor to put those squares together and to make this beautiful blanket. The blanket was sold, all 100% of the proceeds of the sale of the blanket from the auction online goes to the organization that we're supporting. And this time around, this fall 2020 stitch along that we're just jumping into, will be, all the donations are going to an organization called My Sister's Place that's located in White Plains, New York. And it's really worth a visit to their website when you have a second to just see, they're really an advocacy program for women who, or not just women, but survivors of domestic violence that are just, you know, there's legal help, there's housing help, there's job search help. It's really a very expansive and well put together presented program. So we're doing the same kind of thing, but this time around it'll be with a leaf motif. So there's a couple things I learned from the first time we did the stitch along. One was a lot of people loved making for others, but they kind of wish they had a little momentum to keep, a little memento to keep for themselves. So this time around, if you want to get 2 squares in your kit, you can, and you can make one into this really cute little sachet or pin cushion that's stuffed with lavender and it smells really good. Or you can also get a frame where you can put the, I don't know how the glare is doing on that, but you can add your second square and frame it this way and hang it on your wall. So and you can, I'm going to hold that up really close because that is a sample square I put together, and it's got all the stitches that we're going to be learning next right on it. And actually I've learned from doing a few of these online teaching things, there's another one that's just a little easier to see without the glare of the glass that kind of complicates the imagery. So we have these leaf stitches. This branch is sewn down with a technique called couching. There's a back stitch here on this little maple leaf. We have a chain stitch. There's a blanket stitch on the edge here. So we won't have time to go through all of the stitches, but if you sign up for the stitch along, a part of what you get with your purchase is stitch book pages. So each stitch has a separate page that explains exactly how to do it, just to use for reference. This project is suitable for anybody, whether or not you have any experience with hand sewing. One of the things I actually love the most about teaching is finding someone who has never done it before, and then following them through their learning process and seeing the kind of neurons firing, and all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I can do this. And it's so exciting, and it's exciting for everyone around that person. So not to worry if you have no experience, or if this is something that you haven't thought about doing in a really long time, it's totally fine, and you're really welcome, and you are in the right place if you're into nurturing yourself, nurturing the planet, helping others, and a whole bunch of fun. That's what the stitch along is all about. So I am actually in a different location than I've been at the last couple of times where I've taught online, and I feel like my connectivity is much stronger today. But for the reason of just to be able to show you really clearly what the stitches look like, I brought just a scrap of white canvas, and I'm going to be stitching with black embroidery floss, just so that you can see it really easily. But I do want to take a minute to show you a kit. So this is a kit, and there's a couple of other little bits and bobbles that are hard to hold up this way, but it comes with all the needles and pins and the little buttons and beads that you need to jazz things up. And then we will be going through the whole process, start to finish, together as part of the purchase. So you get, if you can make the classes live, that's even better. And if you can't make the live classes here on Zoom for the stitch along, they will be recorded and posted in our little private Facebook group so that you can watch them at your convenience. So right now I'm using black embroidery floss, and this is, I like this brand the best. It's called DMC, and it's just, it's kind of it's like the Band-Aid of bandages. Like people, this is an old brand. I think it's made in Paris, France, if I remember correctly. And it's just a really nice quality material. Some of the other brands, I mean, they work, and I don't want to be too exclusive or elitist, but if you're doing a lot of this kind of stitching, I really highly recommend getting a hold of some of the DMC embroidery floss, just because it seems to be a little bit more of a smooth, and the colors are really consistent, so you can like really match if you get into doing some more detailed, like needlepoint or something like that. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to say to you that when I am using embroidery floss for the stitch work that I do, I usually like to work with a color palette that kind of goes together. This is one of the squares I did, a sample square I did for the last stitch along. You can kind of tell that the palette is all kind of like springish. So there's like light pastel-y purples and oranges, and there's a little bit of purple that has a little more density to the hue. But I like to kind of plan a palette and then use it. Now, with the kits, of course, you are supplied with the embroidery floss colors that you need, but you can always augment the colors that you get. And if you're interested, I sell a palette of embroidery floss from my shop every season. And it comes in this cool little envelope that's got like a little needle keep inside. And this is our fall palette. So it's got some really beautiful, rich, warm and hot colors from kind of pumpkin, and there's always a variegated one in the mix. And this one's called Wildfire. It's like my new favorite color, which is really like 3 or 4 colors. But at any rate, if you're looking for embroidery floss, check out my shop at crispina.com to find that little packet. So then in addition, you're going to need a needle, and the one I'm using here today is called an embroidery needle. I also sell those in my shop. And if you participate in the stitch along, of course, one will come with your kits. The only thing you're going to need, well, there's 2 things that are handy if you don't have, that won't come in your kit. And those are a nice sharp pair of scissors. And for really, you're just going to need to be snipping threads. You won't need to be cutting too much fabric. And also a steam iron. If you have a steam iron, that's really helpful for this type of work. So we're going to start today with a really fun stitch that's, it's called a leaf stitch. And I'm going to show you a couple samples. So this little orange leaf right here is embroidered. So that's the stitch we're going to do today. And it's a really fun one because it kind of just develops without, you kind of like, what? That just made that. Wow, cool. So you're going to start with your, I have a little bit more than a yard of string of embroidery floss here. And you don't need to have that much. A yard is plenty. And you're going to just push your needle through your fabric and you're not winding up on the back side. So there you go. And my needle is threaded and I have the long end knotted. So if you're really a beginner and you need a little extra help, pop your questions. There's a question and answer box at the bottom here on the webinar bar. Like if you look at the very bottom of your screen, if you have a question that's like something that's not about what we're doing right now, like an overall type of question, pop it into the question and answer box and I'll allow time for that at the end. And if you have a question about like, hey, what did you just do? Pop it in the chat. My girlfriend, Carolyn, who is 100% awesome, and I can see that she's already been posting to everybody. There's a couple of links there that she popped in. So if you have stuff that you need help with, pop it in the chat box. And then if you have kind of an overarching question that has to do with more with the grand scheme of things, pop it in the question and answer box, and I'll get to that at the end. Okay, so here we are. We got our, and you guys can see this, right? Because we're doing black on white, which was a suggestion from someone who took my last class. It was actually attending my last webinar. So thank you very much to I can't remember the name of that person, but thank you for the suggestion. That's really helpful. Okay, so now I'm going to put my needle in about 1/2 inch down below the top where I came out. I'm just going to hold this so you can see. Okay, and then come out right next to that place, so just a little distance from where my first stitch went in. Let's see. Here, can you see it? Okay, now we're just going to pull that through, and you're going to have a little stitch. See that right there, a little black stitch? Now, this is the fun part. You're going to stitch. I'm just going to poke my needle in and then hold it up so you can see it. Okay, so you're going to put your needle in on the other side of that first little stitch, just about the same distance from it as where you came out. And then you're going to poke your needle back out just below that stitch. And you're going to pull your needle through. And as you're pulling, you're going to catch the loop of the stitch with the stitch. Does that make sense to you? So I have that loop and there it is. It's like a little U shape. Can you see it okay? Cool. So now I'm going to take another little stitch, I'm going to hop over that little loop. So secure it in place, and I'm going to come up again next to that little fork shaped stitch. And oh, someone just asked that, Shauna, thank you so much for your question. Am I splitting my embroidery floss or am I using the whole 6 strands? Now, I just want to back up a minute. Thank you so much for that question. Sometimes I get going and I forget that people are learning and they don't have all the knowledge. So this is a strand of embroidery floss, and it comes, you know, there's 6 ends in the strand. So you can separate your 6 strands into as many as you'd like. For this demonstration, Shauna, I am actually using all 6 together in one thick strand so that you can see it really well with the video teaching. If I were doing this and I was not on camera teaching, I would use 3 strands. I just like the way that looks. It's purely personal preference. It's like what you like the aesthetic of. I find also, one of the things I think about when I'm deciding what kind of thickness I want to use for stitching is the thickness of the fabric that I'm using. So the fabrics that we're using for the stitch along are kind of weight wools. We're changing it up. Last time we used a very heavyweight wool, so this time it's a little lighter weight. And the half strand, like the 3 strands, so the half of the 6 weight, works really nicely with that kind of weight of fabric. And something lighter weight, say like a nice summery breezy shirt, you might want to go with 1 or 2. So it's really up to you. And the other thing you want to consider is your needle size. So if you're using 2 strands instead of 6, I want to go with a thinner needle just because it's going to be easier to pull through your fabric. So there's a bunch of different things to consider, but don't ever let any of that stop you from trying, because no matter what, even if you have a big fat needle and you're only using 2 strands, like, it's going to be fun and it's going to look awesome. So all of these little intricacies are things you can kind of work into your practice as you become more well-versed with it. So, okay, I'm going to pull this string right through and I'm going to catch that little bottom of my U. Let's see if that's visible. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to just stitch over. I'm going to start at the top and I'm going to poke my needle down just below the place that we just caught the U. Does that make sense? So pull that through. We're going to have another little U there, and we're going to just snug it up a little bit, get it a little bit more even in tension. Okay, and then we're going to secure the bottom of that down with another tiny stitch and come out back at the top there. And when I say at the top, I'm just imagining that this is going to be a leaf. And you can kind of play with the shape of the leaf that you make. Like, this leaf is going to be kind of round and wide, the way I've got it started. But you could make it long and pointy. You could make like a fern-like thing with a stitch. It's really fun to practice it. Once you start doing the stitch, you kind of realize all the intricacies and the little variations you can make to change the shape and and really have it work for lots of different, it's really nice for like botanical kind of thought, you know, plants, if you're doing any kind of like botanical imagery in your embroidery, this is a great stitch. So do you see, and it's also, it's actually looking a lot like a rake. Like that would be a fun little technique to use to, if you were doing kind of like a little garden theme, you could use it for depicting a rake, or even if Halloween's coming up, that might be a fun thing to do a little Halloween embroidery if you're crafty like that. So there I am, I'm gonna catch the bottom of that little U and go right back up to the top. So this is just, you're gonna repeat the stitch back and forth until you feel like you've got the leaf shape that you like. And I'm just gonna take this last stitch and then I'm gonna show you how to do a little stem so that it's the whole finished stitch, and you can sort of take that to on your own and develop it the way you like to. So let me see here. Let's see, are you able to see that clearly? So there's my last stitch. Now I'm going to catch that U, and this time I'm going to do what's called a back stitch. So I'm going to go over the U, and I'm going to just show you where my needle's going this time. So I've caught the bottom of the U shaped stitch with the top where the needle's going into the fabric, and then I'm going to come out of the fabric about, I think it's about 1/4 of an inch beyond that. Okay, and this is going to make the stem. So I'm going to pull that through, and then we have it like this. Okay, now this is where the back stitch comes into play, and the back stitch is a stitch that you can use for a lot of different things. You can use it as almost like a drawing line. You can use it for sewing, like if you're sewing something by hand that you might machine for, like just a straight like seam, you can use a back stitch for that. It's a really secure stitch. It's pretty quick and it's pretty versatile. So on this, I'm just going to show you on here, like all of this, the yellow work done on here is all done with the back stitch. There's a lot of back stitching on this. So actually pretty much all of the decorative kind of lines on this little sachet are done with back stitch. So it's a very useful stitch. Okay, so now we're going to go back into where, so when it's called a back stitch because what you're going to do is you're going to go back to where you came out of the fabric and you're going to go forward. So on the back side, you're still the length as they are on the front. So do you see that? So you're starting back to where you went into the fabric, with the last stitch, and then you're going to come out of the fabric about 1/4 of an inch past where your yarn is coming out right now. How's everybody doing? Are there questions? Is everybody, if you're able to, reception. I'm so used to not having people be able to make out what I'm doing. It's so exciting to feel like that might be behind me. Is everybody able to see? Okay, I hope so. Okay, so this is the second stitch. So now we're going to make another one. We're going to go back in where we came out, and then we're going to come out about 1/4 of an inch beyond where the yarn or the floss is coming out of the fabric now. Do you see how that is? Cool. Okay. So I'm going to pull that through. Now, if I was making a leaf with the stitch, I'd probably just go back into this stitch and call it, okay, there's your stem. See how that is? So you might want to do that, or if you want to practice more with the back stitch, you can just continue on, make a line, go hog wild. You can make spirals, you can make straight lines, you can kind of play with it and see how to change the direction of your line. You can draw your line down on your fabric with there's these pens I have that are like vanishing ink, kind of like for marking on fabric. And those are great kind of thing, especially if you're just playing around and you're really just kind of experimenting. It doesn't really matter whether or not the pen comes out, so you can use a pencil or something like that to just give you something to follow. At any rate, I see from somebody that they're way behind, and I just want you to know one thing. I think your name is Galaxy, which I love. So Galaxy, let me just tell you something. there's no such thing as way behind. Okay. If you want, I can slow down and I can repeat stuff. I'm happy to do that. And you can just play around with this. This is really designed for you to spend an hour on your beautiful Saturday, just letting go of all the stress out there and having a lot of fun. So I'm going to keep doing the Stitch Galaxy, and this is for you, just to help you feel like you're getting this. Because I know I've been doing so much learning lately, you guys. Most of my learning's been like platforms online to help with this kind of thing, like teaching online. And sometimes the people I'm learning from are just going like, and they're talking about CRMs and ATBs. And I'm like, I don't have a clue what they're talking about. And I'm like, excuse me, what are you actually talking about? And they're usually really thankful for the realization that they're speaking in terms that are not commonly understood. So, so if you have, please don't hesitate. Just pop it in there. There are no stupid questions, just so you know. Like I'll answer the same question 14 times until you understand it clearly, and I'll try to do it differently so that you can we'll find a way to make it easy to understand. So here's another stitch for Miss Amanda. It's Amanda. That's Galaxy's name in real life. I do like Galaxy though, Amanda. I think that, maybe your middle name should be Galaxy. Can we call you Amanda Galaxy now? Okay, so then we're just going to keep pulling that through, and this is purely for fun, right, you guys? Okay, so far we've done a leaf stitch, and now we've done a back stitch. And the next stitch I want to show you is called a chain stitch. And it's kind of similar to that leaf stitch in a funny way, in that you catch the thread as you're sewing it. So it's almost like crocheting and embroidery at the same time. Okay, so this stitch, we're just going to keep going with the same piece of floss. So you're going to put your needle in right next to where it came out of the fabric, and you're going to take a tiny little stitch that's like maybe 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so here is what I'm talking about. Let's see. Yeah, so needle's in there right next to where it came out, and I've got a little stitch taken. Okay, now I'm going to pull the needle through, and just like with the leaf stitch, I'm going to catch that loop right around my thread. Do you see how that works? I'm just going to snug it down. You don't want to pull it too tight because you want to be able to, it almost looks like it is a loop right now, and it's going to look a little bit more like a braid in a second. Okay, so then your second stitch, we're going to go back into that loop next to where your thread came out, and you're going to take another small stitch, and I'm going to show that to you again here. So it goes into the fabric through the loop of the last stitch, and then you're going to pull it through. Let me see if I can do this where you can watch the whole process. Pull it right through. So see that loop? It's like the thread is coming through between the loop, and there's your second stitch. Okay, so this is a fun stitch to use for sort of the same places you might use a back stitch if you want to see like a drawn line a little bit more. It's a little bit heavier. It's kind of like got twice as much thread showing, so it's a little bit more of a like a bolder line. It's fun for botanicals if you're doing like stems of flowers or any kind of heavier drawn type of line is nice for this stitch. I was saying with my last webinar, I was teaching embroidery to personalize blankets, like the baby blankets that I make out of recycled sweaters. And I use this stitch to embroider the baby's name and birth date, or like sometimes it's a couple or whatever commemoration. I use the stitch to just write that out on the blanket. And it comes out really nicely. And it's just, it's kind of a nice, easy, fun, easy to read kind of stitch. So that is what, let's see, there's 4 stitches there. I don't know. Can you see those pretty well? There. Cool. So that is, so we have chain stitch, we have back stitch, and we have the leaf stitch. And if anybody joined late, I see that there's a couple people who are just hopping in now, and that's totally fine. What we're gonna, the stitch along is this amazing collaboration. So what happens is you sign up, you have to sign up before tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. And that's when we do the deadline is so that we can get started. So then we'll send kits out. We're cutting all kinds of pieces and getting everything prepped for everybody in the studio, and we should have the kits in the mail on Wednesday. And then we're imagining we'll be starting our in-person classes the following week. It depends on where people order from. The last time when we had our stitch along in the spring, we had a couple of people in Europe and Canadians that joined us. So it took a little bit longer for us to get started. We want to make sure that when everybody gets their kits, then we start the classes. So there's 3 classes, they're an hour long, and they're also recorded. So you can go back and check them out for reference if they're time for you, or you can just watch them over again if you need a little extra help. And they're posted in the private community that's online for people to just troubleshoot and inspire and connect with there. So it's a real lot of fun. And I feel like the actual the stitch along itself is it's a really nurturing experience, and it's really something that I feel really thankful that I have this wonderful group of people who are so interested in joining that kind of work. Like it's for others, right? So you're making a beautiful thing that's got love stitching. And this is kind of a funny thing. Like, you hear people saying, oh, the dinner was made with love or whatever. And it sounds kind of hokey and weird and a little woo-woo. But I honestly believe that we all have this amazing human energy that we can share by doing things for others. So when we're stitching our components together for the stitch along, it's just nice to be reminded that you are really nurturing women, mostly women, survivors in general, and there's certainly not all women, survivors of domestic violence who oftentimes don't think anyone cares about them. So when you're stitching and you're caring and you're loving, all of that energy is carried forth by the fruit of your work. And it's just so beautiful to have the ability to share that and to put that out into the world and to let the people in the shelters know that we're out here doing it. So the other thing that I want to mention about the stitch along, which is really something that came as a question from a participant the last time, is that there's a scholarship fund. So if you're not in a financial position to join the stitch along, there is a scholarship fund. And if you are in a position to donate to the scholarship fund, you can do that in $10 increments. So you don't have to make a large donation. It can just be $10. And that money is set aside for anyone who feels as though they need it. So if you can just send me an email and request a scholarship, or you can go to the Stitch Along registration page and make a donation there. So the more donations that we get, obviously, the more people in need that we can serve. And I'm looking forward to the day where we can offer to the women who are in the participating shelter at that time, paid for by other people who are able to help with that. So then it would be like a super win-win-win, right? Like, so we're getting together and joining together to make something beautiful. We're inviting people who maybe don't have the means to do that on their own. And then we're selling this blanket to someone who has a lot of means to purchase it, but it's also really building just a lovely level of giving and meaning in our lives. So I'm just gonna see how everybody's doing over here in the chat box. Does anybody have any questions that are specific to what we're up to right now? We have plenty of time left. We can go over some more stitches, or if anybody else has anything they want to go back over. Amanda, how, oh, somebody wants to see how to start the leaf. Okay, I'm gonna start that over again. And I'm gonna just finish off this thread, and we're gonna start a fresh stitch with that. So it's funny, the leaf stitch is very similar to a lot of stitches where when you start it, it's a little tricky, but once you get going, it's actually quite fun and easy, but sometimes that first stitch is really kind of what is a little difficult. So I'm just going to stand up here and see my whole face, but it'll be easier for you to see my stitching. So here's your fabric and here's your needle and thread. I'm going to start by just poking my needle through so that the knot is on the back of my fabric. Okay. And the first stitch you take is one little stitch down. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so it might be easier to see. Okay, so this yarn, this embroidery floss is just, it's coming out of the fabric here, and then my needle is going into the fabric about a half an inch below where it came out, and it's coming out of the fabric next to and a little lower down than where my floss came out. Okay, that's your first stitch, and you're just going to pull it through, and you're going to have just like a little stitch on your fabric. Okay, your next stitch is where the fun begins with the leaf stitch. You're going to go in, and I'm just going to place my needle and I'll hold it up to show you. Okay, so now you're going to hop onto the other side of that first stitch. You're going to put your needle in at about the same distance from the stitch as where your floss is coming out on the other side. And then you're going to come down, you're going to come out of the fabric just a hair below where that first stitch came out. Okay. I'm just going to check the chat here. Is this making sense? Okay. So I'm going to pull it through. And it's going to catch. There's like a little loop. And if you can see with see how that loop is, the thread is coming through the loop. And then you're just going to kind of secure that loop down by stitching over it. So let me place my needle again. Okay, so the stitch now is going over the very bottom of that loop to secure it. So the thread is here and it's going, so my needle's going in just below the loop and it's coming out again at the top, but a little lower down than the last one, okay? And we're gonna pull that through. Okay, now we're gonna go back up to the other side. And are you finding a rhythm with this? Okay, so then you're gonna put your needle in next to your last stitch on that side, and it's the needle's kind of pushing them together a little bit, and you're gonna come out just below the last little stitch. And then you're gonna pull that through, and again, you're gonna see that loop form. See that thread is gonna hold that loop into kind of like a leaf shape. Is that making sense now? Cool. So that's kind of how you get started with the leaf stitch and how you kind of move along with it as well. And the more you play with that stitch, the more you can kind of like, you know, you can make like leaf shapes that are really pointy and like, you know, like that. You can make them round like lily padish. You can make all different kinds of leaf shapes using that stitch, depending upon how you, you know, where you start your stitch and where you come out of the fabric too. So let's see, it looks like Reed Barnhart. Hello, my dear. Reed was with us for our last stitch along, and Reed, maybe you have a second to pop a little comment in that everybody can see. I'm hoping that if everybody can see the comments, I'm not sure how that works, but Reed made a really beautiful square. I remember it clearly, and she is attempting to order double stitch along and ran into a problem. Okay, I'm going to check on that, Reed, and see if we got your order. And if we did not get your order, I will let you know. And I'll check also, I'll look at the site because if there's something going on our end, I'll be sure to address that. So this is what I'm talking about. I've been doing a lot of learning, and my learning curve, you know, is just, sometimes it gets a little frustrating, but really what's been frustrating me has been the connectivity issues that I face living in rural Western Massachusetts. And I just want to thank from the bottom of my heart, my girlfriend, Jill Weinberg, who let me use her space for this webinar today, because it really seems as though things are a little bit easier to see. I think I haven't gotten any warnings across my screen that says your internet connection is unstable, which always makes me worried. But at any rate, I think that that is really awesome that we're here and we're able to connect at all. And I always remind myself when I get frustrated with my connectivity that we're really just so lucky to live in this time where we are able to connect outside of being in person, because right now being in person with friends is really kind of dangerous, which just seems so strange to me. Still to this day, it seems weird. So I feel like if there's not a lot of other questions, yes, Carolyn just put a note in the chat. If you have problems registering for the stitch along, please do email me. Hello at Crispina will get to us, no problem, and someone will get back to you as quickly as possible, certainly before. We're all working this weekend, so it's not, don't worry, if you send an email, we'll get you. And actually, Carolyn, could you also post, could you post a link to the website to register in the chat box? And then I will also be sending, I'll send out an email with the recording of this webinar, as well as the link for registering if you're interested. And share this around. We have just a little bit less than 48 hours to gather a group of awesome people to make this the most incredible stitch along yet. And my goal is to raise even more money with each stitch along that we do, and get the word out and about domestic violence, and about how we can support survivors in ways that are, you know, it's easy to write a check and it's easy to feel like you're not able to do anything, but this is an opportunity to do more than write a check, and to come together and really bring joy to your own life while you're feeling really like meaningful, right? Like it makes you, I don't know, I love that aspect of this project, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. So thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time on this glorious day, and you're welcome, Shauna. And oh, somebody wanted to talk about beeswax for the floss before I dash off. And you know, when I was packing my things to come down here to Jill's place to do my webinar this morning, I did not grab my beeswax, but I'll tell you, it's a really useful tool. And it's a little cake that I have a girlfriend who she's a beekeeper, and she makes little beeswax cakes for me that I sell in my shop. I think they're under $10. They're a little cute little thing. They have a little bee put on there, and they're from her local organic bees. And what you do is you take your embroidery floss, and you kind of like, imagine that this little sweater or scissor sheath was a piece of beeswax. You hold your thumb down on the cake of beeswax, and you just pull your thread across it. And I usually use it like 3 or 4 times for you know, to wax it well. And then you can thread your needle more easily. It kind of holds the fibers of your thread floss together, so it's easier to thread your needle. It also makes your thread run through the stitches really smoothly. It keeps your embroidery floss from tangling, and it's just a nice little additional tool. It's actually called loving your thread when you do that with your thread. So it's an old ancient, I mean, I don't know how ancient, it's probably ancient. Bees have been around for a really long time, and so has stitching. So I know that back in the day when people were making a lot of crazy quilts and a lot of embroidery floss was being stitched through lots of layers of quilts, it really was a tool that was very commonly used. Speaking of which, it's great for embroidery floss or cotton or linen or hemp stitching material, but it's not great for fuzzy stuff, fuzzy things like wool or cashmere or acrylic or mohair. Like, you wouldn't want to wax that kind of material. It just doesn't really have the same assistance. It's not really used for that. So so the shop for the registration page for the stitch along is at the link that Carolyn posted just a little bit ago. And I think, yeah, it's actually It's, well, it's in the chat right now. The link to the shop is in the chat. And if you have trouble, send me an email, hello@crispina.com, and I will send you a personal link. And then also my website shop is at a different location online, and that's at crispina.com/shop. And that's where you'll find things like the beeswax and the embroidery floss and that kind of stuff. The stitch along registration page is a different checkout place. So thank you for all these questions. I just want to make sure I have every question that came through here. Patty LaChance, how are you? Thanks for being here today. She has been following me forever, for years, and she has sweaters. Oh, she thinks I'm inspiring. Oh, oh, that's so nice. So she says that I actually made a difference in her world personally by getting her started with embroidery. So Patty, I'm so thankful that you shared that with me. It makes me so happy. That's really, really like what I find the most meaning in is just knowing that there's people out there who might not have considered being creative with textiles, and they find it and they realize that it's just a lot of fun, and it's really nurturing. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I look forward to staying connected with you. So I think I got all the questions, and thank you very much for being with me today. I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to being connected with you in the future, and maybe that'll be with the stitch along. It's really exciting. So the other thing that happens, and I just want to throw this out there before we sign off, is that the kits will ship out on Wednesday, but everybody who has joined Stitch Along by Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time will be invited to join the private online community on Monday morning. So we will get started. So it's my goal is to keep us really engaged and really having a lot of fun right through the next few weeks, because we got 24 days before our national election. And I know that people from all over the world are just as concerned as each of us are about what our future holds. And this way we can stay focused on positive things and powerful. We can stay powerful. So let's do that together. I really look forward to it. And thank you again. You guys are awesome.